Chapter 1, Organizational Behavior. Class agenda. What is organizational behavior? Does organizational behavior matter? How do we know what we know about organizational behavior? Think of the single worst coworker you've ever had. What did they do that made them appear to be incapable? Think of the single best coworker you've ever had. What did they do that made them appear so competent? When you think about that, now you're thinking about organizational behavior. How did these people behave? What made them behave that way? And the questions associated with that versus what we probably just thought about was what you were seeing. We never thought about the why. Well, in organizational behavior, that's what we try to understand is the why someone behaves that way. And usually there is a legitimate reason why. And it is much more complex than what you would think, and it entails a lot more than what the average person would think. A field of study devoted to understanding, explaining, and ultimately improving the attitudes and behaviors of individuals and groups and organizations. So, organizational behavior, a model organizational behavior. So, as we look right here, we see we have different categories in this chart. We see categories for organizational mechanisms, group mechanisms, and individual characteristics. Individual mechanisms and individual outcomes, job performance, and organizational commitment. So when we look at this, we look at the organization, we look at the group, we look at individuals. Why? Because all of these things are actually related. And they connect. And if you look at the arrows, you see. So when we look at the arrows, when they connect, they ultimately lead to that job performance and organizational commitment. That's where we're trying to get to. In order to get there, you have to have these other things, these phases and steps that people go through. And when you get to individual outcomes, job performance and organizational commitment, that can be good, bad, or ugly. But whatever that is, it's because of the things that happens in these first two categories that causes those things not to be what you would like. Does organizational behavior matter? Do firms that do effective job of managing organizational behavior concepts become more profitable as a result? Not necessarily, but a lot of times they do. It's not a guarantee, but what I can tell you is you see improvements in other areas, whether it be, we always think in terms of profitability, making more money, but also sometimes you have to look at happier employees, people working together, more teamwork. A lot of times those things will result in more profit or being more efficient, which also leads to more profit, but it's not always. But what I can tell you is when they do an effective job of it, it definitely does not hurt. It definitely helps the organization in many ways. Figure 1.2, what makes a resource valuable? The resource-based view of the firm. Now, this is very important. And I want to give you an example. You have two organizations. They are in the same industry. One has been in the industry for, let's say, 10 years. The other has only been in the industry about 3 to 4 years, but they're rivals and they're compete against each other. So what the newer business is doing is trying to copy what the older business is doing, and so that they can actually try to get more more market share. So there are things that they can imitate, such as the history of the company, things that they've done, numerous small decisions, socially complex resources. Things they can imitate. Here's what they can't imitate. If that company actually has some managers or leaders who are really, really good. They are visionaries, they have vision and strategy, and they're leading the company in a positive way. That's what they cannot duplicate, and that's what you consider rare. When you put the imitatable with the rare, correlate those two together, you get resource value. So that older company is going to have a higher resource value than the newer company, because they can't duplicate the great leaders that they have, who are considered to be rare. Table 2-1-2, survey questions designed to assess high performance working practices. So organizations who actually put a lot of emphasis on organizational behavior, they will do things to assess their high performance work practices. They want to know, what are we doing that makes us good, or what are we doing that can make us better? They ask those types of questions. Businesses who are not as good and don't look at organizational behavior, they don't ask those questions. What they ask is, well, what's going on? What's wrong? What's wrong? Who's to blame? It's got to be somebody. Something's wrong. Versus looking at it, it's a different mindset. One is actually considered to be more proactive, and the other is more reactive. Proactive means that they're looking at things, they're trying to look at things and assess stuff and do analysis so that they can actually be better and not make mistakes. The other organization who not assesses high performance, they only wait till things happen, and usually it's bad before they try to do stuff. Table 1-3, the 100 best companies to work for in 2019. This group of companies right here were organizations in 2019 that were determined to be high in organizational behavior. They did things to try to determine, they were proactive to try to determine what they could do before things happened. How could they take care of the people? They promoted good work environments. People wanted to work there. They didn't have high turnover. So a lot of folks looked at these places and said, these are some of the companies we'd like to work for. Well, the reason they were is because of their mindset. Their mindset was, we look at organizational behavior. Why do people do what they do? Why are we good at what we do? Why do we make mistakes here? And try to understand the why and the things associated with the why, so that they could actually either correct those or intervene or prevent things from happening. Other organizations, plenty of other organizations, do not think this way. I call it forward thinking. They don't think that way. And subsequently, they didn't make this list because their people don't enjoy working for them, and they're not getting good results like these 100 companies are right here. So what's so hard? The rule of 1/8. So if you took, let's say, 100 companies, and of course everybody claims that they want to try to do things right. Okay, so let's cut that in half. Cut that down half, 50. Now you're saying that those 50 of those companies are legitimately trying to put forth an effort. The first 50 we cut out, they weren't. Now let's cut that 50 down. Those are ones who try, but they came up short. So when you look at the ones who actually end up left the 1/8, those are the companies who actually try and succeeded. And they looked at organizations, they looked at things that they could do. They were forward thinking, and they did make comprehensive changes, and they were willing to do and go farther than the other organizations were. Remember, the first 50 dropped off because they said they wanted to do something. They didn't even try. The next group dropped off because they said they wanted to and they tried, but they didn't succeed. The group that's left, the 1/8, is the group that actually says, you know what, we want to do it, we tried, and we succeeded. Where does the knowledge in the textbook come from? Knowledge in the textbook comes from an understanding that requires an understanding of how we know things in general. So this is based on precedents. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution in this country, you had people that were studying organizational behavior. And it's been going on for a long time, many decades. And as a result, we developed knowledge and we gathered data and we came up with research. Well, what we do is, well, I should say what researchers have done is throughout the years, they've built on that. They built it. One person comes up with something and somebody else comes up and takes it farther. So there are things that we know because there are studies and research and data that's been done throughout the years. And what the researchers have done is they've actually looked at the previous information and decided to do some other things. This is where the knowledge comes from. So we understand the knowledge because of a vast history of a wealth of knowledge and understanding how things work in general. How do we know about these causes? Well, people to stay healthy. People to stay healthy, children to grow up happy, employees to be satisfied with their jobs. It's because of the data. It's because of data. It's because of research. And again, the precedents. The research has been done in previous years and folks building on it. You look at it and you go into a community. Why is it one group you go into a community, but there's a group within that community, they're healthy, but there's another group in it, they're not. And it's like, okay, well, these people live in the same community. Why is one group kind of healthy and another one's not? Well, there's reasons why. And you have to get in there and look at do the research, do the studies, gather data. And realistically, there's probably somebody did some similar data back years in the past that you're going to take that in consideration when you're doing yours. Children grew up happy. Well, depending upon where they grew up, the circumstances are. Those things will actually influence how these children grow up, how they think and behave as adults. You've often heard that people have issues as adults because of things that happened in their childhood. Well, when children grow up happy or whatever, that's something they take into their adulthood as well. And these tend to be individuals who are actually pleasant to work with, and they feel good about themselves, and they do good in life. Employees to be satisfied with their jobs. When employees are satisfied with their jobs, it shows up in so many different ways, and it's not always measured in just job performance. It may be situations where they're good team players and they do things that others won't do. So, but at the end of the day, most of the time they are good job performers, but there are other things as well. Sometimes the things people don't see. Methods of knowing. Experience. Experience is one of the ways of knowing when individuals look at and say, you know what, I can relate to this because it ties closely into a belief of mine. So the experience, it ties closely into a belief of mine, so therefore I can follow that logic. The intuition, a lot of times, is going to be how people feel about something. And you look at it and say, well, and I give you an example, intuition. A lot of times with people who believe in matter of fact, for instance, well, that's a known. Everybody knows it's crazy to go do that. Well, everybody may not know that, but you do. So you assume that everybody else knows it because you know it. And that's your intuition. And people, as humans, we do that oftentimes because we think about something, feel about something a certain way. We think others will too. Well, they may not have our background or experience. They may come from a different culture and they don't think the same way that we do. Authority is something that we'll look into and we'll say, because, well, I can buy into that because it was said by the federal government, or it's said by the state government, or it's said by this big bank that, So realistically, even though a bank doesn't have authority, it does have reputation and stuff. And when you see these kind of things, people can buy into that because something or somebody, or some organization who they believed or determined that had authority, therefore they could buy into it based upon that. The science, this is when something that you may believe in that might be supported by some science that you found or you've heard of. Therefore, we can buy into it and we can believe in that because we found some science that will support how we believe. The scientific method. The scientific method. When we look at this, we come up with these hypotheses. You find people that come up with these hypotheses. And the hypothesis is what? It's an educated guess. That means somebody who's got some type of experience and background can guess about something and say, you know what? I think this will work and this is why. So after they do that, now they have to go and find the data to try to support that position. Once they find the data, then you verify. You start doing the verification process and to try to vet the data. After you've done that, when you conclude it, then you end up ultimately with a theory, and then you can say, okay, this is what we found to be the case. This is our theory based upon the hypothesis, the data, and the verification. This is the scientific process that happens a lot of times. You see this definitely people who work in research, healthcare field, a lot of times law enforcement, anybody who's dealing with something where they can't go and give an opinion. People are notorious for giving opinions about things, but realistically, like say for the court of law, you can't go in and just give an opinion about something that you just pull out of your rear end, because that doesn't make sense. It's because that's just what you believe. Here, they're giving scientific evidence to something to support what they say, so they have come up with a theory. So scientific interest. So this is how you find out if you have scientific interest in whether a particular area or whatever else. You see the 1 through 5, strongly disagree, strongly agree. You see the average score on this is 15. And I won't read all 5 of these, but if you read those, you can see. I can tell you right off the bat, just reading those, I would have a very low score because I'm not scientifically inclined, and I'm not interested in science in that way. But I know other people who would score decent and score very good. But it depends on the type of person that you are. What is a theory? A theory is a collection of assertions, both verbal and symbolic, that specify how and why variables are related, as well as the conditions in which they should or should not be related. So again, this is going back to like your hypothesis, educated guess, collection of assertions, both verbal and symbolic, that specify how variables are related. So again, you find things that are related, and doing this vetting process and you're gathering data, you're going to find things that show that, how things are related that should be and how things may not be. It can actually support, it can be a theory to support something or a theory to refute something. How do we know about organizational behavior? So let's take a look at something that everybody's near and dear to everybody. Movies. Most people enjoy movies. Now, granted, most people enjoy different types of movies, but most people enjoy movies. So let's use this for example. If you look at a movie and we look at a box office receipts, and let's say we're looking at a box office success, there is a formula for that. Even though when we go to movies, we go for a movie because we like it. Well, guess what? There's been a lot of research and data done to try to determine if this movie can be a box office success, because that's what everybody strives for. Now, even with that being said, there's still movies that go to the theaters and bomb because it's for various reasons things didn't work out. So now let me tell you the things that has to work out for these movies to have box office success. The quality of the script. You can't have a good movie with a bad script. You'll see some movies where they may not have much of a script, but it's not that kind of movie. It may be an action movie or with a lot of violence and whatever else, where people go to see it because of that. So it's not really so much for the great story, the great script, but it might be a good storyline. Then you have favorability of ratings. You have people who do ratings, and they're out there for the public to see. Well, for people hear that ratings are really good for something, they may be inclined to want to go see it. Here's something that's very important. Fame of the person, the lead people in the movie, or the lead man and the lead woman. There are people who are known to be lead headliners, is what they call them. And they're associated with big movies. One of the names that comes to mind right off the bat for me is Tom Cruise. Most of his movies he makes, they are big ticket. They cost a lot and they make a lot. Buzz generated. A lot of this is going to be through the commercials, through blogs, various networks, social media, entertainment channels. When a movie is actually determined to be good or very popular, you get a lot of buzz about it. When you bring these things together, you look at box office receipts. This is where you go from having box office receipts to box office success. And that's what they strive for, is to have box office success. And to put things together, you see the formula, what it kind of takes to do that. So consider the theory diagram shown above. It explains why two independent variables, the quality of a movie script and the fame of his stars affect the independent variable, how much the movie makes at the box office. In these groups, build a theory similar to the one shown for each outcome. So when you look at job satisfaction, strain, motivation, trust, and supervisor. Job satisfaction, we all know. You got job satisfaction. This is a situation where a lot of times you have productive people when they have job satisfaction. Strain, if you have a strain, a consistent strain on individuals, a lot of times they can't stay but so long before they actually say, you know what, enough is enough. Motivation. What's someone's motivation to do a job? Or what's someone's motivation not to do it? There are people who are underperforming, but they're not bad enough to be fired. So they're low performers, but not bad performers. Well, what's the difference between their motivation and people who are high performers? They do the same job, but one is all right and one is really good. And see, as a manager or leader, these are the kind of questions that people have to ask. And when you get to that point in life, you have to figure out what's the motivation of people working for me. If you understand that, then you know how to get the most out of them. Trust in a supervisor. There's a saying out there that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers and supervisors. It is very common for folks to leave places of employment not because the organization's bad, not because the culture's bad, because they're working for a bad supervisor or a bad manager. How do we know about organizational behavior? So to test our theory, we gather data on variables included in our hypotheses. We then use variance of the correlation coefficient to test hypotheses and to see if they verify our theory. The correlation is as follows. Perfect positive relationship, 1. No relationship at all, 0. Perfect negative relationship, -1. Strength of the correlation inferred from judging the compactness of a scattershot of X and Y values. More compact equals stronger correlation. Less compact equals weaker correlation. Isn't it amazing the things that we've never thought about, what goes into trying to determine when you're looking at people's behavior, the things that are taken in consideration. Cause and effect is really what we're talking about. What causes something to happen? Again, a lot of times we look and say, this person is this person is mean, this person is not pleasant, this person is not able to do this job. This is getting to, let's find out why this person is not doing their job, or why do we have a problem with this group of people. This is trying to understand what it is, the root cause. And it may be more than one thing. It may be multiple things that actually like the perfect storm that comes together that's causing you to see a certain behavior out of a group of people or an individual. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these next couple of slides, but what we're looking at here is this is correlation, and C is being measured. If you look over here to 1, is job performance and social recognition behaviors. But again, measurable. Here again, you see the chart. Measurable. 3 different correlation sizes again. Again, measurable. So, some notable correlations. So we look at height, weight, ibuprofen, pain reduction, amphetamines, antihistamines, and reduced sneezing, smoking and lung cancer within 25 years, coronary bypass surgery and 5-year survival. So what they're looking at, when you look at these situations, these are people we're talking about, and they're looking at correlations to try to determine what's the nature of the relationship, what's the nature and the scope, how many different things may be correlated here between height and weight. For instance, I'll give you an example. I saw a recent, not recently, but within the past couple of years, I saw a study of individuals in Mexico. And it was talking about some individuals from Mexico who actually lived, they came from tribesmen. They still live in the tribes up there. and they had diets and things that they ate. Well, the ones who stayed behind and lived in the tribe, in the mountains, out in the jungle, and then the ones who left and came into the city, years later, they looked at them, and what they found is the same group of people, but that actually came from the same place but lived in different places. The ones who came to the city had developed health problems, major health problems, and they had gained a lot of weight. The ones who still lived in the village and the tribes were actually still thriving, not having health issues, and their weight was maintained. And the correlation that they found was it was coming into the city, changing their diets, and starting eating foods and stuff that was not healthy for them. And realistically, because they didn't grow up on it, it was really having major adverse effects on them, medically speaking, and in particularly their weight. So correlations, and they found out exactly what they were. And I'm just giving you a thumb size, a little small amount of what they talked about. But those are the kind of things. Correlation. How big is big? What's the correlation between height and weight? Will the correlation between job satisfaction and job performance be higher? So again, when you look at correlation between height and weight, there was a study that was done on that correlation between height and weight, and it was done with Koreans, North and South Koreans, and they showed how much taller and how much more weight South Koreans were versus North Koreans. Again, it was their lifestyles that were different, and South Koreans were able to consume healthy foods and live healthy lifestyles and exercise and do things, versus the North Koreans who lived in an oppressed regime and they couldn't do it. And so their diets were worse, they exercised less, and their lifestyles were not as healthy. So what you found is these people who used to be one group of people once upon a time, now they look different. And what they did was to look at the correlations. What were they? And they found them. Will the correlation between job satisfaction and job performance be higher or lower? It can be higher or lower. And a lot of times when you find it, there are situations where job satisfaction, people may feel good about their job, but their performance may not be that great. And those are people who are content where they are and they enjoy it, and they kind of got the car on cruise control at 35, but the speed limit is 55. And then there's other people who have job satisfaction and they truly enjoy what they do, and this reflected in their performance because it's higher. The correlation. Important disclaimer. Correlation does not prove causation. Proving causation requires correlation, temporal precedence, elimination of alternative explanations. So when you look at correlation, that means relations. How are things related? How are they related in other things? And temporal precedence is you look at things that transpired before, and you look at the past and the history and things that can bring that's happened before and that may be related. And then also you have to look at the elimination of alternative explanations. For instance, you can't just go there and say that, well, I was looking at this company and I was looking at the people on first shift and second shift, and I noticed the people on second shift are much more productive than the people on first shift. So the people on first shift are lazy. That may sound like that may be logical, but no. There may be some alternative explanations. Here's what I didn't tell you. This is a mill where these people are working, and it's hot. So they live in a hot climate. So what's happening during the day is really hot and it's sweaty. Subsequently, they're getting drained and they're sweating and getting tired and wore down. The people who come in at night, it cools off. So they don't get as hot and sweaty and tired. So they're actually able to perform better because the working conditions are better for them. So see, that's an alternative explanation that one would have to eliminate before they said, well, these people on first shift are just lazy. How do we know what we know about organizational behavior? The correlations between multiple studies get averaged together using meta-analysis. So realistically, when we look at the correlations, let's say that you have 3 professors, one at Harvard, one at Yale, and one at Brown, and they've done studies. And they concluded, they came up with their hypothesis, they came up with their theories. Well, what you can do with the meta-analysis is go through and take a look at all 3 of those and bring those together. And meta-analysis can then form a foundation for evidence-based management using scientific findings to inform management practice that basically has been done by other people. And, that's when you say, okay, I'm really being thorough in my approach here. Moneyball. Moneyball was a movie. It was made years ago, and the main actor in this movie is Brad Pitt. This is centered around, and it's a true story, based on a true story. The Oakland Athletics, the Oakland A's, the Major League Baseball team, they actually had scouts. And let me explain to you how scouts historically worked in Major League Baseball back then. They had people who worked for them who were scouts, talent scouts, and they would go out and they would look to try to find young guys or talent on other teams or coming up to minor leagues to bring to their team to try to make them better. So they would draft people, and they would trade for folks, and they would do all kinds of things. Well, how they did this, it was based on their experience. Usually these were older guys who had been around a long time. Their experience and their gut. Their head and their gut is how they did it. Well, there was a guy, and I can't remember his name, but in the movie, he actually is Ivy League educated. And he tells them that, hey, there's a better way to do this. Analytics is what he was talking about. Some of you who actually watch sports may have heard of this. And he said, we can use analytics to determine who would be the best players for your team. And I remember in the movie, you saw some of the guys were saying, that's some witchcraft, voodoo mess. Get that out of here. It would never work. Well, a couple of people high up believed him and said, you know what, let's bring him on and see. Well, he was able to show them through analytics that they were drafting some of the wrong people. And he was showing them some of the people that you should be looking at. And it was based upon the talent that you have and the deficiencies that you have. I ran analytics on these people right here, and these folks will fill your void. They're going to do things for you that you need to get done that you didn't know you need to get done. And you didn't realize it's not just hitting home runs. It's like, hey, this guy didn't hit home runs, but he prevented a lot of home runs. This guy didn't hit, he hit some home runs, but he did a lot of other things that your team is actually not doing that you need. And he did, and he was able to show them statistically through the analytics. Now it's something that's very popular, and you see it in all levels of sports. Summary. Moving forward, this book, the following chapters work through the integral model of OB, beginning with the individual outcomes, continuing with the individual, group, and organizational mechanisms that lead to those outcomes. Each chapter ends with 3 sections: a summarizing theory diagram, results of meta-analysis that summarize relationships between the chapter's topic and both job performance and organizational commitment, description of how the content of the chapter can be applied at a specific level in an actual organization. That concludes Chapter 1 lecture.